Good afternoon, everyone. I'm over here in the machine shop side of things for our Welding 2 and Welding 3 class. On the test, there's going to be a section that says belt sanders, pedestal grinders, and wire wheel. I've combined all three of those machines, those tools, belt sander, pedestal grinder, wire wheel, into one test. I'm going to make this into 3 videos just to keep it simple. So when I say belt sanders, I'm referring to these two. They're in the machine shop. This is a 2-inch, this is a 1-inch. Really simple to use, you guys. Toggle switch to turn them on right here, and then another toggle switch right there to turn that one on. Operation is the same. There are a few specific questions on the test that deal with this, okay? So I'm going to go over those. So the first question, I know you can't see very well on here because of the video, but we're going to try our best. The first question, how small a piece can safely be sanded or ground on a belt sander or a regular pedestal grinder? The question is always this: can you hold it in your hands securely? If you cannot hold it in your hands securely, you have no business grinding it. But I have a rule of thumb, folks, that basically says I don't want your fingers any closer than 3 inches from that belt. So if your fingers end up closer than 3 inches to that belt at any given machine that is a belt sander, grinder, something like that, it is too small of a piece, and you're either going to need to sand it by hand, or you're going to need to grind it with a hand grinder by putting the metal in the vise, taking a hand grinder to it. So bottom line, question number 1, how small of a piece can be safely sanded on the belt sander or ground on a grinder? The answer should be any piece that you can hold securely, as long as your fingers are always 3 inches from it. So let me say it again. You can grind or sand any piece as long as you can hold it securely and your fingers always remain 3 inches back. Okay? I'm going to jump down into the test, and there's another question on these 2 belt sanders specifically, folks, and it has to do with where you should hold your piece. We don't want to be sanding up here, because when the metal hits this belt up here, it's going to slam it down. The belt is going this way, so the belt is coming down. You always want to have your metal resting on this table. So here's a good example. I've got this piece of 2-inch square tubing. I don't want to sand it up here. Whatever I do, I want to sand with part of the metal at least resting. So I could sand here to deburr it, and even if I had to do an edge, I could tip it up, as long as there is contact between the tubing and the table. You're in business, okay? So you could go like this, you could go like this. Keep it down here securely against the table, all right? There's another test question that says, why can thin pieces of metal not be sanded on a belt sander, or why can they not be ground on a grounder? And the reason is this, you guys: if you take a thin piece of sheet metal and try to sand it, it is going to get sucked down into the machine between the belt and the table. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in on this and show you what I'm talking about. So bear with me here while I zoom in. What I'm saying is this: right now it's against the belt, but with that downward movement, it's going to pull it in, and this is going to end up down in there. That will do a couple of things. It will cut the belt and sever it, and that belt is going to fly out of there and smack you right in the face and the hand, and you're going to get hurt. The other thing is, if you have your fingers near here, it could actually slide that down, chop the end of your fingers off, or worst case scenario yet is your fingers end up down between the belt and the table. So bottom line is, we never ever sand thin pieces of metal on a belt sander or grinder, because they're going to slide down and get stuck between the belt and the table, which is bad news. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out now. Move this a little bit. All right, next part of the test. I'm going to go down to that question where it says, why should you never sand or grind the face of thin metal on the pedestal grinder or belt sander? When I say the face, I am referring to this. This is the edge. That's fine. You can sand that. But it's this face this face, whatever, that you do not sand. You are asking for a major accident right now, okay? All right, pretty darn easy on the belt sander. There's really no other big things here, you guys, except you got to expect this to cut fairly slow. Don't push your metal hard against it. You'll actually burn the belt up. It'll wear out quickly, or you'll sever it, and then you got this thing flying out of there at you because it's become loose. Go easy. Don't push hard. Take your time. Okay? All right. Number 11 on the test, I'm skipping down, says, why must you always grind evenly across a grinding wheel or a sanding belt? You guys, the main reason is we don't want you to wear out one spot. Don't come over here and just stay in one spot. Work your way evenly across it. It wears the belt or the grinding wheel out evenly as you go, instead of having one bad spot in there. Okay? All right. 13, I'm going to skip down to, and it's a repeated question, but I want to emphasize it. It says, if you cannot get a good hold of what you're sanding on a belt sander or grinding on the grinding machine, what's the method you can use? The method would be this, folks. Put the piece of metal in a vise, grab a hand grinder, and grind it that way. The metal's held securely, you're going to be fine. Or use a sander of some type, or even a file. But if you can't hold it securely, you have no business putting it on the belt sanders or the grinder. Okay? I'm going to back up. Number 12, what type of pressure must you apply to grinding wheels or sanding belts when you're using these? It's light pressure. Do not push hard. You'll actually cut the belt, wear it out too quick. Just bad news. Don't push hard when you're doing this. Okay, now this next one is a very important question. You guys, on both the belt sanders and the grinders, we never wear our welding gloves. Your welding gloves are loose, and if those gloves were to get caught, like you would bump your hand up against here, it would get a hold of that loose glove and it would yank your hand into it. Extremely bad news if that happened, okay? So we do not wear gloves when grinding on a pedestal grinder or a belt sander, okay? Then in review, number 7, I already talked about, but that metal plate on both of these, keep your metal resting against that no matter what you're doing. It's a support for it. That's what you need. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up on the belt sanders. I'm going to go get a grinder out and zoom in on it, and you're going to be able to see a little bit more detail on the pedestal grinders, but that wraps up the belt sanders. These two work really well, and they're both in the machine shop. We use them for deburring metal. We also use them for some shaping of metal at times, and we also use them for grinding tungsten when we do TIG welding, which you welding 2 folks are not there yet. Welding 3 guys are. So that'll wrap it up on the belt sander.